What is a transaction broker? A transaction broker is an agent who represents a seller or a buyer, and what they do is they have a responsibility to that person to operate honestly, fairly, and account for all funds with limited confidentiality. Now, the difference between a transaction broker and a single agent is a single agent has a fiduciary responsibility to either a buyer or a seller, and they can only represent one party fully at any given time. Now, a transaction broker has the right to actually represent a seller and represent a buyer in the same transaction. Now, there is a slight difference in the rule. They don't have a fiduciary responsibility to either side, but they still have to operate for the transaction itself. So if you are an agent who has a listing for sale, but you also have a buyer who's not represented by a buyer's agent, you can represent that buyer and submit their offer to your seller, but at that point, a little bit of the rules have to change. You can no longer discuss price or motivation from either party. So let me give you a quick example. So if I have a seller who's selling a house for $500,000 and I go and represent a buyer who also wants to submit an offer on that listing, and they say, Jose, we love this property. What do you think would be a fair price? A fair price for that property might be $500,000. That is what the seller is asking for. So that $500,000, I can't go back to the buyer and say, well, buyer, they're asking $500,000, but I happen to know they'll probably take $480,000. You can't say that. You can only tell them the price that the seller is asking. Now, you can provide the buyer with maybe some comparative market analysis of homes that have sold in the area and how you arrived to the price that the seller listed. So then that buyer can now make their own educated decision without you interfering or getting involved with the process when it comes to price or motivation. Now, say we submitted an offer for $475,000 to the seller. The seller says, Jose, $475,000 is okay, but I think I want more. What do you think we can get the buyer up to? Now, I can't tell the seller that I happen to know that that buyer is pre-approved for $600,000. So what I could say is, seller, what would you like to ask the buyers for? And I could go back and ask them for more money if that's what you'd like. So remember, price or motivation doesn't come into the conversation. I can't tell the buyers that the sellers are getting a divorce and they're desperate to sell. And I can't tell the seller that the buyers desperately want their house and they're willing to pay any price possible to get their hands on it. We become neutral, and at that point, we only represent the transaction itself. So there you go. That's a transaction broker. There you have it.